Every year, on the coldest night of January, I put on a coat I have kept for 30 years, ride a city bus to the end of its line, and walk into a diner as a man who has nothing, to find out who is still kind to a stranger who can do nothing for them in return. Most years the answer is quiet and small, and restores my faith in people, one cup of coffee at a time. This year, the answer arrived in two people at once, sitting 20 feet apart in a diner off Michigan Avenue. One of them was a waitress named Marisol, who refilled my coffee without being asked and told me to sit as long as I needed. The other was a man in a $400 coat named Trevor, who spent an hour trying to have me thrown out into the snow. By the time the night was over, one of those two people would have their whole life changed, and the other would learn exactly what it costs to be cruel to a man you have decided is beneath you. This is the story of the night I stopped being invisible. My name is Calloway. I am 55 years old, and I am, by most measures, a wealthy man. I built and sold a tool and die company over 30 years, and these days I run a small foundation that gives money away. I am not famous. I have worked hard to make sure of that, the way other men work hard to become famous. Because the thing I do every January only works if nobody knows my face. What I do is this. Once a year, I go looking for one ordinary person to lift up. Somebody whose kindness has gone unrewarded long enough. And I give them enough to change the shape of their life. And the only way I have ever found to tell the genuine article from the performance is to take everything off. The watch, the car, the good coat, the very smell of money, and walk into the world as the kind of man the world has trained itself not to see. You learn everything about a person in the half-second they decide whether a shabby stranger is a human being or an inconvenience. People are honest with a man they think can do nothing for them. It is the only completely honest moment most of us ever give anybody. There is a particular kind of stranger who shows you mercy when you have nothing to give back. And the people who have met one never forget the face. If you carry a face like that in your memory, keep it close while you watch this. I'm going to come back to it before the end. Here is what neither Marisol nor Trevor knew, sitting in that diner, and what you should carry through the whole of it. Because it is the reason a cold January night means more to me than any boardroom ever has. 30 years ago, I was not a wealthy man. 30 years ago, I was a 25-year-old who had lost a job, then an apartment, then the thin cushion of pride that lets a person ask for help. And I spent the worst winter of my life riding buses to nowhere, because a moving bus was warmer than a bus shelter, and nobody made you get off until the end of the line. I was not a drunk, and I was not using anything. I was just a young man who had fallen through every crack there is. The way more people are one bad year from doing than this country likes to admit. I had stopped being able to see a way back. And when you stop being able to see a way back, you stop standing up straight. And when you stop standing up straight, people stop seeing you at all. I became furniture. I became weather. I learned that the cruelest thing about having nothing is not the cold or the hunger. It is the way the eyes of decent people slide right off you, like you are a smudge on the window they are looking through. I want to tell you about that invisibility, because it is the thing people who have never tasted it cannot quite imagine, and it is the thing this whole story turns on. When you are visibly poor, the world develops a skill for not seeing you. People perfect a way of looking at the air just above your head. Clerks answer the person behind you. Footsteps speed up. You become a problem to be managed by being ignored. And the strange part, the part that does the real damage, is that after enough of it, you start to agree with them. You start to believe you truly are less. That the warm lit rooms full of people who matter are for other kinds of men. And that you belong out in the cold with the rest of the discarded things. That is how the cold actually gets you, long before the temperature does. It convinces you first. By that January, I had very nearly been convinced. I had a coat with a hole in the pocket and a head full of arithmetic that kept coming out the same way. which was that the world would not be any poorer without me in it. I was not planning anything. I had simply, quietly, stopped arguing with the cold. And a man who has stopped arguing with the cold is nearer to the end than anybody walking past him will ever guess, which is the whole reason I cannot bring myself to walk past. On the coldest night of that winter, I went into a diner because I had 30 cents, and they had a coffee that came with free refills, and I intended to make one cup last until they threw me out. The night waitress was a woman named Pearl. She was past 60, on her feet at midnight, with the kind of tired that does not come off with sleep. And Pearl looked at me, really looked, in a way nobody had in months. And instead of seeing a problem, she saw a cold kid. And she brought me a plate of eggs and hash I had not ordered and could not pay for. And when I tried to tell her I could not pay, she said, "I didn't ask you to pay, hun. I asked you to eat." She kept my coffee full for 3 hours and never once made me feel like I was taking anything. And when I finally got up to go back out into it, Pearl pressed something into my hand at the door. It was a silver dollar, an old one, heavy and worn smooth. She closed my fingers around it and she said, "That's not for food. That's for the jukebox. Next time you're somewhere with one, pick something happy. You look like a young man who's forgotten there's happy music in the world. I have that silver dollar in my pocket right now. I have carried it every day for 30 years. I never did spend it on a jukebox, because I could never bring myself to let it go, and because it turned out to be the most valuable thing anyone ever gave me. And not for the dollar. That meal did not change my circumstances. I was still broke and still lost when I walked back out into the snow. What it changed was that, for 3 hours, a human being had decided I was worth feeding. And somewhere in those 3 hours, I remembered that I was a person. And a person can start over, and furniture cannot. I climbed out of that winter slowly and then steadily, and I built something. And I made more money than a sensible man knows what to do with. And when I finally went back to find Pearl, to do for her what she had done for me 1,000 times over, she had been gone 2 years. I had waited too long. You only get to be too late once before it teaches you everything. I have spent a fair amount of the money I made trying to understand why some people, at the bottom, get a pearl and climb, and others get only the cold and do not. And the closest I have come to an answer is unsatisfying and simple. It is mostly luck. And the luck is usually a person. Almost nobody claws their way up out of that kind of hole alone. Whatever the men in the warm booths like to tell themselves about bootstraps. There is nearly always a pearl in the story somewhere. Someone who looked at a person the world had written off and decided, against all the evidence and for no good reason, that the writing off was wrong. My whole foundation, all the committees and the careful giving, is really just a machine for finding those people and standing behind them, because I have come to believe they are the actual load-bearing walls of a decent country, and we let them hold the roof up at midnight for the price of a tip. I could give the money away from behind a desk. It would be more efficient, but efficiency was never the point. And a check from a stranger in a suit cannot say the thing I need it to say. The thing I need it to say can only be said by the cold man at the counter, the one nobody sees. On the night he stands up and turns out to have seen everything. So I keep the coat, and I keep going out into the January, because it is the only way I know to make the saying match the meaning. So I cannot repay Pearl. The only currency that woman would have accepted anyway was the kind you spend forward. And that is why, every January, I become the cold young man at the end of the bus line again, and I go looking for the next pearl. The person who is kind to a stranger for no reason and no reward, so I can be the thing for them that nobody got to be for her. I cannot tell anyone what I am doing while I do it, because the moment a person knows there is a rich man behind the shabby coat, the test is over and the truth walks out the door. Kindness only tells you the truth when the giver believes there is nothing in it for them. So I keep my mouth shut and my collar up, and I let the world show me who it is. This year the world showed me. At a Formica counter on Michigan Avenue, in the shape of a man named Trevor Lang. The diner was the kind that has survived by not changing. Vinyl booths and a pie case and a coffee that is better than it has any right to be. I came in stamping snow off boots that had seen a few winters, in the long grey coat with the frayed cuffs, unshaven, my good posture left at home, and I took the seat at the end of the counter that the regulars leave for whoever needs it most. The night manager, a harried man named Cole, gave me the once-over that managers give, the quick calculation of whether I was going to be a problem, and I watched him decide to keep an eye on me. I did not blame him. It is a hard job and a thin margin, and the cold brings everyone in. Marisol was working the floor alone that night, a double. You could see it in her shoulders. She was maybe 50, dark hair going grey at the temple, with the unhurried competence of a woman who has waited a lot of tables and learned that hurrying does not actually make the food come faster. She set a mug in front of me before I asked, filled it, and said the words I have now heard from exactly the best people in this country, which are some version of, "You sit as long as you need, hun." She did not check first whether I could pay. She decided I could stay, and then she figured the rest out later, which is the whole of decency in the right order. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a side of toast, and counted out coins for it slow. And Marisol watched me count and then quietly brought me a full breakfast. Eggs and hash and the good coffee. And when I started to protest, she did the thing Pearl did, the thing the genuine ones always do, which is to take the choice away from you, so you do not have to carry the shame of accepting it. "On the house," she said, before I could speak. "Slow night. Cook'll just throw it out." It was not a slow night, and the cook would not have thrown it out, and we both knew it. And she said it anyway, so that I could eat without it costing me the last of my pride. I have eaten in the finest restaurants on 3 continents. I have never been served anything finer than that plate of eggs by a woman who could not afford to give them away. Over the next hour, in the small things a tired person says to a stranger who seems to have nowhere to be, I came to understand why Marisol worked doubles. She had a younger brother named Danny, 41 years old, who had been born with a disability and had the heart of a child and the laugh, she said, of the happiest person she had ever known. Their parents were gone. Marisol had been Danny's whole world and his whole care for 20 years. She had given up a lot of things along the way. An art school scholarship she could not take, a marriage that could not survive the wait, 100 smaller dreams. And she did not say any of this with an ounce of self-pity. Only the matter-of-fact tiredness of a person who made her choice long ago and does not regret the brother. Only sometimes, late, regrets the life. She showed me a photograph, the way people do when they love someone past what words can hold, and a picture is easier. It was Danny at some past Christmas, a grown man in a paper crown from a cracker, grinning so wide his eyes had vanished, and Marisol's whole tired face changed when she looked at it, 10 years lifting off her at once. "He still believes in Santa," she said, and you could not tell from how she said it whether that was the joy of her life or the heartbreak of it. And I understood that for her it was both at the same time, every single day, and that she had stopped being able to tell them apart long ago, and had simply decided to love the whole of it. She put the phone away and topped off my coffee and apologized for talking my ear off, as if she were the one imposing, as if the lonely old man at the counter were doing her a favor by listening. I've been studying people my whole life, and it still undoes me how much grace gets carried by the ones the world has decided to overlook. She worked the double because Danny's day program had cut its hours, and she was trying to cover the gap. And she was failing slowly, the way good people fail when the math simply does not work, no matter how many doubles you pull. She told me this while refilling the coffee of a man she thought was destitute, and not once did it occur to her to be anything other than warm to me. Because some people do not have a setting other than warm, even when their own light is running low. And then there was Trevor. Trevor Lang was in the big corner booth with two other men in good coats, and Trevor was loud in the specific way of a man who needs the whole room to overhear how well he is doing. He talked about a development deal, and square footage, and a boat, and a watch he was wearing that he mentioned twice. And he talked the way a man talks when the talking is the point. When the deal and the boat and the watch are all really one sentence that says, "Please, everyone, agree that I matter." I have sat across boardroom tables from genuinely powerful men, and I will tell you a secret about them. They are quiet. The loud ones are almost always afraid. He noticed me about 20 minutes in. I had committed the offense of existing at the counter in a frayed coat within sight of his important evening. And it bothered him the way a smudge bothers a certain kind of person. Not because it does anything, but because it spoils the picture they are trying to take of themselves. He said something to his table, and they laughed, and he said it a little louder the second time so it would reach me. Something about how the neighborhood was really going downhill. Something about how you couldn't even get a decent meal anymore without the bus station emptying out into the booth next to you. I kept my eyes on my coffee. I have been the smudge on the window enough times to know that the worst thing you can do is give a man like Trevor a reaction. Because the reaction is the meal he actually came for. So I gave him nothing. And a man performing for a room cannot stand to be denied his scene. So he escalated. The way they do. He flicked one of the rolls from his table, sliding down the counter toward me, a little toss, and told his friends, loud, that maybe the gentleman there was hungry. The word gentleman curled at the edges, so the whole room would know it meant the opposite. The other two laughed. Thinner now. The way people laugh when they are starting to be embarrassed to be at the table. An older couple in the window booth had stopped talking and were watching. A trucker at the far end of the counter set down his fork. The room was beginning to feel the thing a room feels when one person decides to be cruel in public, and everybody else has to decide what they are going to do about it. Which is usually nothing. Which is its own small tragedy acted out in 1,000 diners every night. I left the roll where it stopped. I did not look up. But I was not only enduring it anymore. I was counting, the way I count on these nights. Because cruelty in public is information, and Trevor was telling me, line by line, the whole of who he was. And somewhere in the same room, a woman with a coffee pot was about to tell me the whole of who she was. And the gap between those two answers is the only thing I ever come out into the cold to measure. But here is the thing I noticed, sitting quiet at that counter, that Trevor did not know I could see, and it is the reason I cannot tell this story as if he was simply a monster. While he was performing his wealth for the room, I was reading the tells, because I have sat where he was sitting too, on the other side of a life. The watch he mentioned twice was a counterfeit, a good one, but the second hand stuttered the way the real article never does. When the check came to his table, he made a show of reaching for it, and then let one of his companions take it. And I watched his shoulders drop half an inch in relief. And earlier, when he thought no one was looking, I had seen him quietly fold the leftover dinner rolls into a napkin and tuck them into his coat. Trevor Lang was not a rich man humiliating a poor one. Trevor Lang was a frightened man, broke or nearly so, performing a wealth he did not have. And he had found, in the genuinely poor old man at the counter, the one person in the room he could stand on to feel tall. He was cruel to me precisely because I was what he was terrified of being. I knew it the way you know a thing in your own bones. Because 30 years ago, before Pearl, I had been one bad turn away from becoming exactly that frightened. The difference between Trevor and me was not money. It was a woman named Pearl and a plate of eggs, and which way a man breaks when someone is finally kind to him at the bottom. He had broken the other way. none of which made what he did next acceptable. Because Trevor was not satisfied with the room overhearing him, he wanted a result. He waved Cole over, the night manager, and he complained, loudly, that the establishment was letting a vagrant loiter at the counter, that it was bad for business, that he and his colleagues were paying customers, and they should not have to share air with a bum who had nursed one coffee for an hour. He said the word bum like he was test driving it, and he told Cole to remove me, or he and his money would take their business elsewhere and leave a review that made sure others did too. I watched Cole get caught in the oldest vice there is, between the loud man with the visible man with none, and I watched him start to cave. Because that is what the pressure is designed to do. And Cole had a thin margin and a long night and a family at home, and it is easy, from a warm seat, to judge a tired man for bending toward the louder voice. He came down the counter toward me with an apology already forming on his face. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you," and I prepared to do what I have done a dozen times on these nights, which is to stand up quietly and go back out into the cold and chalk the place up as one that failed the test. And that is when Marisol set down her coffee pot and walked over and put herself between me and her own manager. She told Cole, in a voice that was not loud but did not waver, that I had done nothing but drink coffee and mind my own business, that there was no rule against being cold and poor in America, or if there was, she did not want to work anywhere that enforced it, and that if Cole threw a freezing man into the snow to please a customer who snapped his fingers, then she did not much care to keep working for a place that would do that. She said it with her job in her hand. She had a disabled brother at home and a gap in his care she was already failing to cover. And she laid all of it on the counter to defend a stranger she believed could do absolutely nothing for her. She did the most expensive thing a person can do. She was kind when it cost her something, in front of someone with the power to make her pay. That is the point at which I nearly broke my own oldest rule. Because Trevor turned his cruelty on her then. He stood up. And he told Cole that the waitress could go too, that he would be calling the owner, that he would have her fired for talking to a customer that way. And he pulled out his phone and started filming her, narrating for his friends. "This is the kind of service you get in this part of town. Look at this." As if Marisol's dignity were a thing he could put in his pocket like the dinner rolls. And every protective instinct I have wanted to stand up and become Roy Calloway right then, to pull 30 years of money and weight out of my pocket and bury him with it in front of the whole room. What stopped me was not patience, and it was not mercy. It was that I understood, in that second, that standing up too soon would rescue Marisol from Trevor, but rob her of the thing she had just earned. She had passed the truest test I know, the one Pearl passed 30 years ago, and she had passed it not knowing anyone was grading it, which is the only way the grade counts. If I revealed myself 1 minute too early, I would turn her courage into a transaction. Make it look like she had been kind to the rich man in disguise, and she had not. She had been kind to a bum at a counter. That was the whole and holy point. So I held still 1 more minute, and I let her stand there in her full and uncalculating decency. And I let Trevor finish showing the entire diner exactly who he was, with his phone out and his voice up and his fear dressed in a fake watch. And then, when he was done, when he had spent every cruel thing he had in front of every witness in that room, I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I have found that you almost never have to if you have waited until the room is already yours. I took off the frayed grey coat and I set it over the stool, and underneath I was just a plain, older man in a plain shirt, which is what I always am. But something in how a man stands when he stops pretending to be furniture changes the temperature of a room, and the diner felt it. I reached into my pocket and I set Pearl's silver dollar on the counter, where Marisol could see it. And then I told them who I was, plainly, and what the night was, and why I was really sitting at that counter in a 30-year-old coat. I watched it land on Trevor first, because he had the furthest to fall. I watched him understand that the bum he had spent an hour grinding under his heel to feel tall was a man who gives away more money in a January than Trevor would see in a decade. And that he had done it with his phone out, on camera, in front of the two colleagues he was so desperate to impress, and a diner full of people who had watched the whole thing. The performance he had built his entire evening on came apart in his hands. His friends were already not looking at him. One of them was quietly pulling on his coat. I did not destroy him. I want you to understand that. Because I had every tool in the world to do it, and the whole room would have cheered. And I have learned that the cheering is exactly the trap. I looked at Trevor, and I told him the one thing I knew to be true about him, the thing I had seen under the watch and the volume. I told him I knew he was afraid. I told him I knew the watch was a fake and the rolls were in his pocket, and that he was one bad month from the very counter he had been sneering at. Because I had been one bad month from it myself once, and I recognized the look. And I told him that the difference between a man at that counter and a man in that booth is almost never money. It is which way you turn when you are afraid, toward the people below you or alongside them. I told him he had turned the wrong way tonight, in front of everyone, and that he was young enough to still learn to turn the other way, and that I hoped he would. Because the road he was on ends at a lonely place I would not wish on him. Then I told him to go home. He went. He did not say a word. There was nothing left in him to say it with. And then I turned to Marisol, who had been standing there through all of it with her hand over her mouth. And I did the only thing I have ever really wanted to do on these January nights. The dollars are the least interesting part of what came next, and Marisol would hate to hear them recited like a prize on a game show, so I will leave them out and tell you only what mattered. Danny, her brother, has a place now, a good one, the best in the state for a man with his particular sunshine, and it is paid for, all of it, for the rest of his life, by a trust that Marisol does not have to think about, or fight with, or stay awake over ever again. And Marisol, who is 50 years old and has not painted anything since she was 19, because she gave that dream to her brother without complaint, is back in school. An art school that was honored to have her, with the rest of her life suddenly and astonishingly her own. She tried to refuse it, of course. The genuine ones always do. So I did to her what Pearl did to me, and what she herself had done to me an hour before. I took the choice away. I told her it was already done, that the only thing left for her to decide was what she was going to paint first. I gave her the silver dollar, too. Pearl's silver dollar, the one I have carried for 30 years. I closed her fingers around it the way Pearl closed mine. And I told her it was not for food, and not for the trust, and not for anything she had to earn. I told her it was for the jukebox. Next time she was somewhere with one, and that she should pick something happy, and pass it on someday, to the next cold stranger she found who had forgotten there was happy music in the world. She is the keeper of it now. I always knew I was only holding it for whoever came next. Cole, the night manager, who had so nearly bent the wrong way, did not get thrown to the wolves either. Because a man who is about to make a mistake and is stopped by someone braver than him has been given a gift, not a verdict. And what he does with it is the only thing that matters. By the accounts that reach me, Cole has not bent toward the loud money since. He keeps a seat at the end of the counter for whoever needs it most. And he tells the new hires that the measure of the place is how it treats the person who can do nothing for it. He learned the thing in one night that takes some people a lifetime, and some people never. There is a question that comes up whenever I tell anyone about the January nights, and it is usually some version of whether it gets lonely, being treated like nobody by men like Trevor in the cold. It does not, and the reason is the whole of why I keep going out. I do not go out on those nights to find the Trevors. The Trevors are just the weather. I go out to find the Marisols, the Pearls, the people keeping the small flame of decency lit in a cold country at midnight for no reward and no audience. and I have never once gone looking and failed to find one. That is the thing I most want you to take from a stranger you will never meet. The Trevors are loud, and they are frightened, and they are far rarer than they seem. The Marisols are everywhere, quiet, on their feet at midnight, refilling the coffee of someone who can do nothing for them, and the whole world turns on them, and almost nobody ever tells them so. So here is what I will ask of you, instead of the usual. Somewhere in your life there was a pearl, a person who was kind to you when you had nothing and could give nothing back. Most of us never went back in time to tell them what it meant, and some of us, like me, waited too long. You may still have time. If you do not wait. And if your pearl is gone, then do for a stranger this week what she did for you, with no audience and no reward, and let that be the thing you say to her that you never got to say. Tell me about your pearl in the comments. I read every one of them, and I promise you, I understand. Now go put something happy on the jukebox. Somebody out there has forgotten there's happy music in the world, and you might be the one who reminds them.